What's up guys, CJ Kidney here, and today we're going to be rocking some Shadow Priest in Dragonflight. And if you didn't catch the last video on the TBC Shadow Priest, allow me to introduce. I've been playing Shadow ever since Wrath of the Lich King, and I've loved this spec ever since. Thematically, it's my favorite, and I love the idea of assaulting someone's mind and driving them mad. You know, it's just how I roll. It's been my go-to every expansion now, but oh man, these Dragonflight talent trees are a doozy. So the Shadow community has been in uproar about all the changes and the attention that every other spec and class is getting, but we're not really being given the same courtesy. There was actually a blue post made by Blizzard which said basically, you know, we know that the spec is messed up, but we're gonna try it anyway, so you're just gonna have to deal with it. And after that post, I kind of just had to get to work because myself, like other mains of the Shadow Priest spec, like Public, were very outspoken about it. So I thought I'd give my 2 cents as a seasoned veteran of the spec and see if I can't attempt to fix my beloved Shadow Priest. And without further ado, here we go. Now there are some things with the talent tree that I feel are more minor issues. These are things like underwhelming damage numbers or, you know, things that have easy fixes that I'm going to kind of gloss over. However, there are a lot of things that will require a deeper explanation. So if you don't play the spec, or if you're not really big on development or design, that's going to be your part. And assume that if I don't talk about a specific talent, I don't necessarily see an issue with it from a design perspective, or I just, you know, think it's good, or I like it. First up is Dark Void. Now, Dark Void is an AoE spell that's going to apply Shadow Word Pain to 15 targets that it hits. The problem with Dark Void is that if you take Misery and also take Shadow Crash, another talent further down the tree, they synergize well together, meaning that Misery also applies Shadow Word Pain when you apply Vampiric Touch. Since Shadow Crash now applies Vampiric Touch, they kind of work too well together, meaning that Dark Void doesn't really have a spot. Coalescing Shadows, Puppet Master, and Harnessed Shadows. The reason I've grouped these 3 talents together is because they are the same thing. They're all just an extension of Coalescing Shadows, and the problem with these talents is the fact that it takes 3 different nodes that all require 1 talent point for each of them, which effectively just gives 10% dot damage for 3 nodes. It's made an even bigger problem by the fact that we have another talent, Dark Evangelism, that does the exact same thing, but only for 2 talent points and 1 node. Maddening Touch. This is one that I'm just gonna kind of gloss over because, you know, it's pretty underwhelming. This talent gives Vampiric Touch a 60% chance to generate 1 insanity. And while I like the thought process behind this, it's extremely underwhelming. To run the numbers, roughly it ticks once every 2.5 seconds, meaning every minute you get about 24 ticks, making the talent generate about 14 insanity a minute, which means over the course of a fight you'll get like 1 more Devouring Plague if you're lucky. There are a couple of ways to fix this. You could buff the insanity, you could buff the percentage, or you could make Shadow Word Pain also have a chance to give you insanity. Personally, I think the best way would just be to give it a 100% chance, because then it can be easily tracked and it's a lot more consistent. Idol of Yasharaj. Thematically, when I first saw this talent, I got super hype. I mean, speaking from a PvE perspective, it's just basically a 5-second duration buff on your Mindbender, or it's a 5% damage increase. But I thought it was pretty cool. But it does have some issues that we'll get into later. Void Form, this is another one that's pretty simple fix, and you might be thinking, what are you talking about? This is like the entire center point of the spec. This is our cooldown. There's no way you can just gloss over it, and it's not going to be glossed over. I get more in depth with it later with some other talent choices, but for now I think the only thing it needs is just giving us the scaling and the ramping haste back, because that's really what made the Void Form of Legion and onward so cool, was the fact that it just ramped up in damage and haste, and it was awesome. Loved it. Also, there's currently, I don't know if this is a bug or if this is intended, but Void Form doesn't stack with Shadow Form, meaning the 10% damage buff you get from Shadow Form is gone when you enter Void Form, so you don't actually get a damage boost when you're in Void Form. You just get access to Void Bolt. Idol of Yogg-Saron and Idol of N'Zoth. Now, the idols are something that deserve like their own video, but man, these 2 specifically are just not good. I'm grouping them together because they effectively do the same thing. They're just AoE damage, and we'll get into fixing them way later. Mind Spike and the Mind Spike talents. Oh man, okay, look. I'm not gonna lie, I've never liked Mind Spike. I've never liked it. Personally, I hate it. But, you know, I'm gonna see what I can do. They're trying to make Mind Flay and Mind Spike work together in a, quote, build your own Shadow Priest kind of talent tree. And this is where a decent chunk of the problems come from in my mind. I'm also going to loop Dark Ascension in here because it's very clear that instead of Void Form, this is supposed to be the cooldown for this playstyle. The problem stems from the fact that these talents have no synergy with the rest of the talent tree, and they only synergize with each other. So these are things like Mind Spike, Surge of Darkness, Mind Melt, and Whispers of the Damned. And it makes it feel like it's tacked on, and it just makes the whole spec feel like it's cut in half in terms of playstyle. Ancient Madness isn't really a huge issue, so I'm gonna go ahead and just gloss over it here. The problem that I have with it is that it feels very counterintuitive to the Shadow Priest playstyle. Even back when it was an Azerite power, I didn't like it too much, because as your Void Form went on, it got weaker, which didn't make any sense because Void Form's all about ramping and scaling damages the longer you're in it. It's also currently bugged, and it drains 2% of the crit every second instead of 1%. And I mean, I don't know, that just needs to be fixed before launch. Currently launches literally tomorrow as I'm recording this video, so we'll see what happens. And honestly, to change this, I would just reverse it. I would just make it so that you get scaling crit instead of not scaling crit, you know what I'm saying? Instead of crit that just goes down. This would feel better with the Void Form that would ramp up in haste again. But it wouldn't be a crazy amount, because honestly, if you get scaling crit and haste, that'd just be totally overpowered. Now let's get into how I would change these talents. The ones that I've glossed over, I probably won't touch on too much, but the ones that I didn't talk about, that I mentioned earlier, those are the ones that I'm going to be talking about now, that are going to require like a deeper kind of their own thing. Dark Void probably has some of the least issues out of any of the talents right now, in terms of the ones that I'm going to be talking about. Really, it's only the issue that there's something just better than it blatantly, with a combination of Shadow Crash and Misery. It just makes Dark Void pretty much obsolete. Aside from getting rid of that interaction with Misery and Shadow Crash, you could give Dark Void like its own identity as a good AoE spell. Being that it's the node right above Mindseer, I feel it would be a good idea to make it like an enabler to Mindseer. Have it generate much more insanity than it already does. Currently it generates 15, I think 50 would be a good number, so that it assures at least 2 ticks of Mindseer are gonna go off. And it would be a very good start to a pack in Mythic Plus for us. Just getting 50 insanity right off the bat, we wouldn't have to worry about building up a crap ton of insanity just to spend on Mindseer. Coalescing Shadows, Puppet Master, and Harness Shadows. The issue with these talents, like I said before, is that it's 3 nodes that all do the same thing. I think we should just keep Coalescing Shadows the same. Even though it's not terribly interesting, it's fine as it is. However, we need to squish all 3 of these talents together in one node. Seeing as Puppet Master and Harnessed Shadows, all they do is provide Coalescing Shadows with more stacks when you only ever need to consume 1 stack. The problem is that consuming more than 1 stack doesn't affect the damage of the dots. It's always going to be 10% no matter how many stacks you consume. So giving more stacks is actually just useless. The question then becomes, what do we do with the other 2 blank nodes? And this is where we can add more of a flavor to the dot playstyle that is currently lacking. In place of Puppet Master, I'd like to return one of my personal favorite artifact traits from Legion, Mass Hysteria. What this will do is make it so that the longer we're in Void Form, the more damage our dots do. This harkens back to my point with Void Form earlier, that it's much more fun having that ramping Void Form damage and haste playstyle, and it will help give the cooldown back some of its identity with this synergistic talent. It also adds another element of skill that's been missing from Void Form, seeing as now it extends with Insanity spent. The longer we get in Void Form, the more damage our dots will do. This will help with the low percentage of damage that our dots are actually currently doing, It would also synergize extremely well with Screams of the Void farther down the tree, and Mind Flay Insanity as well. In place of Harnessed Shadows, I would like to add a talent that makes it so that Mind Blast, whenever we hit with it, just makes our dots tick once. It's very simple, and it synergizes very well with the rest of the tree. We get increased dot damage already from 2 different sources, and make that 3 if you add my Mass Hysteria from above. And also, it synergizes really well with Shadowy Insight, giving us the procs of Mind Blast. And every time we get a Mind Blast proc, we could hit it and tick our dots instantly. That'd be pretty cool. Idol of Yashiraj. Truthfully, I love this talent for PvP. However, in PvE, its uses are extremely limited. In most cases, on boss fights, it's impossible to meet any of these conditions. Making a capstone talent around our Mindbender is a fine idea, but I think it misses the mark a little bit. The good thing about the diverse nature of this talent is you can just simply add another condition on. Perhaps one that already exists in game, perhaps one that Shadow already has, like Execute. But I have something better in mind than just pure, percentage execute damage. How about we increase the attack speed of the Mindbender on low health targets? Because every time Mindbender attacks, we get Insanity. This would increase Insanity generation, and it synergizes well with the new Void form, because more or old Void form, I guess, because more Insanity means longer Void forms, and longer Void forms means more haste and faster gameplay to create a pseudo surrender. Man, I miss surrender so much. I miss surrender so much. Bring it back. It would just make like a little kind of Surrender to Madness feel from Legion with, you know, the longer Void forms, the bigger haste, the bigger damage, you know, I miss it so much. Idol of Yogg-Saron and Idol of N'Zoth. These two do the exact same thing from a design perspective. They're both AoE damage that needs to be ramped up. The problem comes from their likeness and their positioning on the tree. Idol of N'Zoth is an AoE talent that's connected to 2 single target nodes and the entirety of the Mind Spike group. So that's going to be the one that I focus on more. Not to say that Yogg-Saron doesn't have its issues, but it's the lesser of 2 evils for now. The problem with Idol of N'Zoth stems from it being connected to 2 single target nodes, Insidious Ire and Malediction. It being on the Mind Spike side of the tree has 0 impact on how it works at all. In fact, it's counterproductive because it only procs off of your Shadow Word Pain and Vampiric Touch. And meanwhile, the talent that makes Vampiric Touch and Shadow Word Pain tick faster is on the opposite side of the talent tree. This side of the tree has nothing to do with dot damage and everything to do with direct damage. It makes it feel like Idol of N'Zoth is just tacked on. Instead, I'd just make a small change. Instead of having Vampiric Touch and Shadow Word Pain proc the idol, it should be Mind Spike and Mind Blast. Also, make the idol's damage single target so that it's not competing for an AoE spot with Yogg-Saron. And speaking of Yogg-Saron, it's okay as it is. I think the damage just needs to be buffed a little bit more because currently it's like 4% of my damage on AoE packs, and as a capstone talent, I'd expect more. Alright, it's no secret by now that I love my dot builds. But truthfully, the Mind Spike group is just ugh. But to keep it here for the people who want it, I think the best way to alter Mind Spike and all of the talents that revolve around it is just to make Mind Spike replace Mind Flay. Make all of those talents and interactions that would normally be with Mind Flay be replaced with Mind Spike if you take Mind Spike. It's pretty simple, and to be honest, I don't know how they just haven't implemented this. The inherent problem is that having the 2 of them together just feels really clunky and unrewarding, like having 2 filler spells that you don't know when to press either of them. Like, when do I press Mind Spike? When do I press Mind Flay? It's very confusing for even seasoned players of Shadow Priest, let alone people who are trying to figure the spec out. Like, they shouldn't have to look at a guide just to know, oh, this is when I hit Mind Spike and this is when I hit Mind Flay. Currently, there's no indication of when to hit either, and it's very confusing. I think they just need to replace Mind Flay with Mind Spike if you take Mind Spike as a talent. And that's going to be pretty much everything that I have an issue with the talent tree. Thank God there's no borrowed power this expansion, so I don't need to go into renown levels or covenants or soulbinds or anything like that, because it has no effect on it because they don't exist, thank God. Let me know what you think, if there's anything you'd like to see me add, or anything that you felt might be a little bit OP, or anything you think that just doesn't make any sense from a Shadow Beast perspective. Please let me know in the comments below, and I will see y'all next time.